Thomas here, and I'm just back giving an update with this issue I talked about earlier, where we found that the UAE and Bahrain AWS data centers were hit with something. At that time, I had my own suspicions, but now we have confirmation from Amazon, and they're actually saying that two of their data centers in the UAE were directly struck by drones. They're saying the one in Bahrain was taken offline and was damaged by a nearby drone strike. So I think it's pretty clear that these were not collateral damage in the sense that there was no interception going on and a missile or drone just happened to fall down there. Why is this happening? Well, we know there, of course, there's the war that Israel and the United States started on Iran. And Iran has responded by sending a barrage of missiles and drones at all the U.S. military assets in the entire region, as they said they would do if they were attacked. So this is very unfortunate, obviously. I'll talk more about maybe at the end of my personal thoughts about the issue, but I want to focus on the business and surviving this in terms of the business here. So this has always been an issue, in my opinion. I've talked before about hosting in bad neighborhoods. In my opinion, hosting with big cloud providers, no matter where in the world, especially though in Europe and US-based ones, is a recipe for disaster. So why do I think that the Iranians struck AWS? Actually makes perfect logistical sense. If you guys heard what happened in Venezuela, we actually heard that some of the AI, like for example, Anthropic's cloud, is being used in real time to help in the operation. So clearly AWS with its artificial intelligence is probably essentially a command and control center for the US military in that region. And it's not just that if you're hosting in the MENA region, which is now going through this war, unfortunately, but when you're in this, as I call, bad neighborhood, when you're dealing with, first of all, US companies that are untrustworthy, you could say. I mean, they're essentially working with, the CIA and the military. One, do you really trust that these are your neighbors? I don't think that's a good idea. Secondly, though, as we can see here, these are very interesting assets to strike, right? Whether by hackers that are motivated by economic issues, or in this case, by war, right? And we're going to see this kind of thing more and more, I think, going on. And it's not going to be the last time we hear of these kind of things. So yeah, very unfortunate. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of my experience in some of the UAE data centers, not Amazon's, but there's of course many other ones I can talk about. Well, I won't actually say their names, okay? But these are facilities I've been to that are probably quite a bit different than Amazon. I'll tell you about one of the first ones I ever visited. I thought we were in the wrong spot. I thought the driver had made a mistake. I thought, why are you taking us to a military installation? Was my first thought. I saw a guard post. I saw, I believe, armed guards, and there were multiple layers of security to even enter the parking lot. So it really felt more kind of like a military installation or maybe a prison. The walls to the facility, I couldn't even see the facility. I just saw walls that were probably more than 20 feet tall, and they had barbed wire, so it looked more like a prison or military installation. As I said, I really thought we got the wrong place. So you have to go through all those checkpoints, through the guards, and even once you're through there, I recall going through walking through two physical checkpoints before I could even enter the data center to meet my contact in there and do what we had to do. So in my opinion, they're actually extremely secure. The other thing around this place that I noticed is that they had a huge amount of these terrestrial satellites. My understanding from those is that this was a backup. That was a plan B if for some reason the United Arab Emirates was ever cut off from the fiber optic lines from the internet. So that was quite interesting. And in terms of maybe how hardened this place was, right? Well, of course they had multiple generators in multiple places from what I recall. I also went outside. I remember they said, brother, it's cold today, we can go outside. I think it was 38 degrees, so that was the coldest day in a while. We were out there, and they were showing me their fueling facilities. And again, it's completely hardened. And this looks more like, I don't know, if you looked at a port and you see how they're storing different types of fuels, that's what this looked like. They had massive amounts of fuel. So I think they'll be okay as long as these ones don't get hit. They're not really a prime target in my opinion, because the U.S. military is operating out of Amazon and not the local Emirati-based data centers. So they are not the prime targets at this time. So that's one way you can diversify. If you can't move your stuff out right away, at least move it to a facility that's under the control of an Emirati-based company and not something US-based, which is a risk to you. And even thinking further than that, I mean, the reason that you would want to do that, if someone wants to be in the Emirates, we'd always tell them, we're going to place you in a local data center, one that we have control over, and one that's not controlled by the US or another foreign company. You lose all the benefits, all the protections that you would get from being there. But going back to the one of the fears that I've seen that's gone around, of course, we hope that internet doesn't get cut off physically to any of these countries, but they've got it covered there, at least in the short term, with the satellite uplinks. And in terms of power, I think they can go for a very long time. But of course, for the people living there, now if the general grid were to be impacted, that would be more of a concern. But in terms of the data centers, I believe that they're in it for the long haul, and they've actually probably prepared for this type of scenario, in my opinion, looking at how hardened they were. Not that they never planned for this. So yeah, it's very impressive how they've done it. But if you want to avoid these problems, of course, you don't want to be in the region right now, at least not as a primary. Some of the Emirati companies and MENA companies we deal with, they're asking what else they can do. Some of them have pretty much put all their stuff there, or with a U.S. company, and of course that is not ideal. So you want to go further afield than that. And just looking here, you can see who's been affected. They talked about many of the Amazon services. It'd be a lot of things running in there. I think I read the Dubai Islamic Bank was taken down, and a lot of other services they say are not working right in the UAE as a result of AWS not working. So again, it kind of raises the question that at that level, if you're operating anywhere, whether in the MENA region or outside, do you really want to be, stuck with a US-based service, whether it's, maybe based on Microsoft or something based on AWS? In my opinion, it is a ticking time bomb. It is a dangerous neighborhood to be in. No pun intended, but I have talked about this before in the past. You want to be in a good neighborhood. What is a place that I think is relatively impervious to these issues, whether economic coercion, military invasion, or political? It's going to be Hong Kong. That's why we're headquartered. That is our primary hub, and that's the place where we really go to try and keep people safe here. And so that's really the key thing. And people have said, well, is Amazon really that unreliable? Well, I mean, look, they've gone down quite a bit, right? Major downtimes in the last number of years. I think there's another article here. Sorry, this one here. This is another one that they didn't cover in the other blog from, I think, October of 2025. So they do go down quite a bit. It's not as reliable as you might think. I don't really blame Amazon or any of the big cloud providers. They have a very difficult job. Imagine how can you keep, thousands of people and servers, reliable when there's so many people accessing them, so many threat vectors. It's very difficult to do. So when they're that large, yes, it's very easy to fail. Of course, the other thing is in terms of the cyber and physical, yes, there could be some actors who want to take them out, especially since they're dealing with U.S. military type of stuff. They are a very valuable target in times of war. Not only for Iran, it could be against other countries that the United States is trying to go to war with or invade. So I don't think it's going to be the last we hear of this. And you definitely want to be in a safer neighborhood. Because like I said, all you have to do to figure out who's on Amazon, you just check their ASN and take a look at all the IPs. You may not know that company A is on IPX, but you do have a way of saying, okay, they're in this neighborhood. If you do enough scanning, perhaps you could figure out who is where. In either case, though, what we do here in Hong Kong is we have what we think is the most extreme privacy option, and we're getting a lot of questions and demand for it spiking around the world recently. So why do we call it extreme privacy? And you don't have to go for this option. It's just really I'd say the most hardcore solution if you're really worried and want to really make sure you're as safe as possible. What we do for this one, we actually acquire a separate facility. We essentially build a secret facility just for you. It's going to be hardened. It's going to have its own separate UPS and generator. It's not on any other facility where any other client is. It is a facility we set up exclusively just for your equipment. So then the next step is that we bring in the fiber optic lines that the client wants, that you would need. whether you need a bunch of 10G circuits from all the various Hong Kong providers, or maybe a bunch of 100G circuits, yes, we can do that. Hong Kong is an excellent place. There are many hardened buildings that are reinforced, literally they're reinforced, that are excellent for this solution. And of course, we don't go advertising or putting our name on the building or the facility saying that this is TechRich or the client is here. It's really essentially anonymous, and so that's what a lot of clients want, because at that point you're not in any neighborhood, you're in your own neighborhood, essentially in our own cyber bunker, and there's just no way someone like the United States is going to be able to come in there and invade and take your data or take you offline, or of course the Hong Kong government into unfairly giving up your information. That's just not going to happen in a place like Hong Kong, because it is extremely strong and is protected by the People's Liberation Army, right? The People's Republic of China is protecting it. So it's just not going to happen. You're not going to see an issue where the U.S. tries to invade and take out your assets there. So that is why I think it's an excellent choice. Obviously, wherever you go, does it have to only be Hong Kong? No, actually, I say you only shouldn't just host in Hong Kong. We don't do that for our clients. Other places that we actually like to talk about are Turkey. I think Turkey is a great option too. We talked about that. If you need kind of European and MENA access, Turkey is kind of an ideal hub. It's half in Asia and half in Europe. And it's not obviously that far from the rest of the Middle East, right? It's a very strong country. It has quite a large and formidable army. It's not a place that's easy to invade, but we'd have to be aware. We have to think maybe ahead here now, looking at the situation. It's not that I didn't know this, but of course, Turkey is a part of NATO. And if we look at the war situation, we see overtures from the UK. I don't want to get into it too much. I don't buy what they're saying. They're calling it that the UK says they're going to be involved in defensive strikes on behalf of the US and allow their assets to be used by the United States for so-called defensive strikes in an offensive war, if that makes any sense. So that concerns me, because there's also been some overtures and NATO saying they're posturing and they're talking. It seems like it looks like the United States have talked to the head of NATO. So there is something going on there. If NATO gets drawn into this and it becomes a wider conflict, then is Turkey out of question from having issues? No, but I still think it's not highly likely, and we have prepared for that eventuality too, obviously for being diversified. But in terms of Turkey, we operate out of facilities that are in diversified areas. One area is, I would call it, almost extremely remote. There are no assets around there that anyone would want to hit. It's quite remote. And then there's also a more primary location, which is less remote. So you have kind of the best of both worlds. But obviously, you don't want to rely on Turkey entirely, though, being part of NATO. If NATO goes into this war, obviously, I hope it doesn't happen. I hope actually things get better. And yeah, I said I would talk maybe a little bit about my personal thoughts. I don't like to really bring a lot of that into here. I like to talk about the business and cybersecurity aspect, but it's very hard right now for me to just be quiet because I have ties to the area. Right, Dubai is like my family's second home. I do not like to see drones and strikes and fires in Dubai or anywhere in the UAE or MENA region. And I also equally don't like to see these schools and hospitals being bombed, whether it's in Iran, whether it's in Gaza, or even anywhere else in the world. I don't like to see that. And especially this time of year, in the middle of Ramadan, we hope that in general that there can be peace, and that rationale is what rules at the end of the day. We can't control the actions or this war that the United States has started, but hopefully the people that are unwillingly involved can hopefully make things better rather than worse. And I hope it heads out that way, guys. But, in terms of life, in terms of business, we have to protect ourselves, and we have to have a plan B, unfortunately, right? Especially in the world of IT and cybersecurity, you never know what can happen. So as much as they say Hong Kong's the place, yes, I believe that. I don't really foresee any big issues happening there. But you want to be diversified in different parts of Asia, different parts of Europe, and even the United States for some applications, depending. If you want privacy, then I'd say no. You want privacy, you don't want to be in Europe. But there are maybe certain parts that companies have, right? Maybe they have public-facing infrastructure. Maybe there's just certain things they're trying to share that's completely public. Maybe those parts of services are just fine to put into Europe, and they're just fine to put into the United States, as long as they don't offend the United States or Europe, depending on where your business is from. So we have all those things that we take into consideration for our clients. And at the end of the day, on a personal level and a business level, I just want everyone around me and all of our clients, and even those that are not our clients, to be all right. So guys, yeah, these are my quick thoughts here. We can see things are changing rapidly in the world, rapidly in the MENA region, and we can only hope that everyone makes it out and that things get better. In the meantime, guys, yes, please do have a plan B, and let's take this conversation onto Mastodon and onto different platforms here, and hopefully everyone is going to be safe. And I just wish everyone safety, peace, and all the best. Take care, guys.